Friends, thank you for being here today. What if I told you that while every developed nation struggles with an approaching catastrophe that could collapse social systems, destabilize governments, and trigger unprecedented human suffering, one country has quietly engineered a solution so comprehensive and strategically brilliant that it transforms what should be civilization's greatest challenge into its ultimate competitive advantage? And what if I told you that this solution, implemented through a classified program launched 18 months ago, positions Canada to inherit the skilled workforce, technological innovation, and economic dynamism of entire continents, while its competitors face social breakdown and economic collapse? This is not how nations prepare for the crisis of the 21st century. The crisis is not nuclear war, pandemic disease, or economic recession. It is the mass displacement of human populations on a scale unprecedented in recorded history. By 2050, according to conservative projections from the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change, rising sea levels, extreme weather events, and agricultural collapse will displace over 1.2 billion people globally. These climate refugees will seek survival in the few regions that remain habitable and economically viable. Most developed nations view this approaching displacement as an existential threat to their social systems, economic stability, and political coherence. They are building walls, militarizing borders, and designing policies to exclude the massive population movements that climate change will create. Canada has engineered the opposite response. I have studied the classified documents of the Climate Migration Integration System, a comprehensive program that began discrete implementation in late 2023 under the designation Operation Northern Haven. What I discovered is the most sophisticated strategic response to global crisis in modern history, a plan that converts humanitarian catastrophe into strategic advantage while solving multiple demographic and economic challenges simultaneously. The world thinks this is about refugee policy and humanitarian assistance. They are measuring the wrong transformation. The Climate Migration Integration System is built on mathematical recognition that the approaching displacement crisis represents the largest transfer of human capital in history. The 1.2 billion people who will be forced to abandon their homes include engineers, scientists, doctors, technicians, educators, entrepreneurs, and skilled workers whose expertise will be essential for economic competitiveness in the latter half of the 21st century. Countries that successfully integrate these displaced populations will inherit the accumulated human capital of entire regions. Countries that exclude them will lose access to the skills, innovation, and economic dynamism that displaced populations bring. The nation that develops the most effective integration infrastructure will dominate the post-climate economy, while its competitors struggle with labor shortages and economic stagnation. Canadian strategic planners recognized this opportunity while their international counterparts were focused on exclusion and deterrence. Instead of building barriers against climate migration, Canada has spent 18 months building the world's most sophisticated system for converting climate refugees into productive Canadian citizens within 36 months of arrival. The system operates through 4 integrated mechanisms that work together to transform climate migration from a burden into an advantage. The first mechanism is the Global Talent Identification Network, a classified program that uses artificial intelligence and satellite surveillance to identify skilled individuals in climate-vulnerable regions before displacement occurs. The network monitors educational institutions, research facilities, technology companies, and industrial centers in regions projected to experience climate displacement within the next decade. Canadian officials maintain detailed databases of engineers in Bangladesh, medical professionals in the Pacific Islands, agricultural specialists in sub-Saharan Africa, and technology entrepreneurs in coastal cities worldwide. When climate events trigger displacement from monitored regions, Canadian immigration officials immediately contact identified individuals with offers of expedited relocation, guaranteed employment, and integrated settlement services. The system ensures that Canada secures the most valuable human capital before other countries can compete for the same individuals. The second mechanism is the Accelerated Integration Infrastructure, a network of specialized facilities designed to process climate migrants through Canadian integration programs at unprecedented scale and speed. These facilities, disguised as continuing education centers and job training programs, can process 50,000 individuals annually through comprehensive programs that include language training, credential recognition, cultural orientation, and employment placement. The infrastructure operates in remote locations across Canada where climate migrants can be integrated without straining existing urban systems or creating political tensions with established populations. Northern Ontario, the Prairie Provinces, and Atlantic Canada provide space for massive integration operations, while offering employment opportunities in resource development, infrastructure construction, and technology implementation. The third mechanism is the Economic Integration Accelerator, a program that matches climate migrants with specific economic opportunities designed to maximize their productivity within Canadian systems. Instead of generic employment assistance, the program creates targeted pathways that utilize the specialized skills that displaced populations bring while addressing Canadian economic development priorities. Climate migrants with agricultural expertise are integrated into Canadian food production systems that expand cultivation into northern regions, made viable by changing climate conditions. Displaced engineers are channeled into infrastructure development projects that support Canada's expanding population and economic activity. Medical professionals from climate-affected regions help address healthcare shortages in remote Canadian communities while gaining Canadian credentials and experience. The system ensures that climate migrants contribute immediately to Canadian economic development rather than requiring years of support before becoming productive citizens. This approach makes climate migration economically beneficial rather than costly, while providing climate migrants with meaningful opportunities for rebuilding their lives. The fourth mechanism is the Strategic Demographic Distribution System, a classified program that manages the geographic placement of climate migrants to achieve optimal demographic and economic outcomes. Instead of concentrating migrants in existing urban centers, the system distributes populations to achieve strategic objectives including Northern Territory development, resource extraction expansion, and regional economic diversification. Climate migrants are settled in patterns that accelerate Canadian territorial development while avoiding the social tensions and resource competition that mass migration typically creates. Northern communities that have struggled with population decline receive skilled workers who can support economic expansion. Resource development projects gain access to specialized labor pools. Urban centers receive managed population increases that support economic growth without overwhelming existing infrastructure. The distribution system ensures that climate migration accelerates Canadian economic development across all regions while maintaining social cohesion and political stability. The result is a demographic transformation that strengthens rather than strains Canadian social systems. The mathematical scope of Canadian advantage becomes clear when we examine the scale of human capital that climate displacement will make available. The 1.2 billion people projected to experience climate displacement include approximately 200 million individuals with post-secondary education, 50 million with specialized technical skills, and 25 million with advanced professional qualifications. Countries that successfully integrate even small percentages of this displaced talent will gain enormous advantages in innovation, productivity, and economic competitiveness. Canada's systematic approach to climate migration integration positions it to attract and integrate the most valuable segments of displaced populations, while competitors struggle with ad hoc responses to humanitarian crises. The strategic implications extend beyond simple population increase to encompass fundamental transformation of Canadian economic capabilities. Climate migrants bring specialized knowledge of tropical agriculture, renewable energy systems, water management, disaster resilience, and other skills that will be essential for adaptation to global climate change. Canadian agriculture benefits from knowledge of crop varieties and farming techniques adapted to changing climate conditions. Canadian renewable energy development gains expertise from regions that have already implemented large-scale solar, wind, and hydroelectric systems. Canadian water management systems incorporate knowledge from regions that have successfully managed scarce water resources under extreme conditions. The knowledge transfer effects create cascading advantages that extend far beyond the direct contributions of individual climate migrants. Canadian research institutions gain access to diverse perspectives and specialized expertise that accelerate innovation across multiple fields. Canadian companies benefit from global market knowledge and international business connections that climate migrants bring from their regions of origin. Early indicators from the first year of Operation Northern Haven demonstrate the effectiveness of Canadian climate migration strategy. According to unconfirmed reports from Immigration, Refugees, and Citizenship Canada, the program has successfully integrated over 15,000 climate migrants through accelerated pathways, achieving employment rates exceeding 90% within 18 months of arrival. The integrated populations have contributed to Canadian economic development through entrepreneurship, innovation, and specialized knowledge that existing Canadian systems could not have generated independently. Climate migrants have established over 300 new businesses, filed more than 150 patent applications, and created employment opportunities for Canadian citizens in expanding economic sectors. The demonstration effects are accelerating as Canadian success with climate migration integration becomes visible to international observers. Countries facing their own climate displacement challenges are studying Canadian methods while recognizing their inability to replicate Canadian advantages in geographic space, resource availability, and institutional capacity. The European Union faces the prospect of massive climate displacement from Africa and the Middle East without possessing the geographic space or political consensus needed to implement integration programs at Canadian scale. European countries are forced to choose between humanitarian obligations and political stability as climate migration exceeds their absorption capacities. The United States confronts internal climate displacement from sea level rise and extreme weather events, while simultaneously facing external migration pressure from Central America and the Caribbean. American political systems have proven incapable of managing existing immigration challenges, making systematic climate migration integration politically impossible. China possesses the geographic space for large-scale population absorption, but lacks the institutional frameworks for integrating diverse populations while maintaining social stability. Chinese approaches to population management rely on cultural homogeneity and political control that are incompatible with successful integration of climate migrants from different cultural and linguistic backgrounds. The competitive disadvantages facing other developed nations accelerate as climate displacement intensifies beyond their management capabilities. Countries that cannot effectively integrate climate migrants lose access to the human capital that will determine economic competitiveness in the post-climate economy while facing social tensions and political instability from unsuccessful attempts at population absorption. Canadian advantages compound over time as successful climate migration integration creates positive feedback loops that accelerate further success. Climate migrants who achieve successful integration in Canada communicate these opportunities to networks in climate-vulnerable regions, creating preference flows that direct the most capable displaced populations toward Canadian systems. International recognition of Canadian success with climate migration creates diplomatic advantages as countries facing displacement pressure seek Canadian assistance with managing their own migration challenges. Canada becomes the global authority on climate migration integration while maintaining control over the most effective systems for converting displacement into economic advantage. The economic implications of Canadian climate migration strategy extend beyond direct population benefits to encompass fundamental advantages in global economic competition. As other developed nations struggle with aging populations and labor shortages, Canada gains access to young, skilled, motivated populations that provide the demographic foundation for sustained economic growth. Canadian cities expand and modernize as climate migration provides population growth that supports urban development and infrastructure investment. Canadian labor markets gain flexibility and dynamism as diverse skill sets from different global regions complement existing Canadian capabilities while addressing specific workforce shortages. Canadian innovation accelerates as diverse perspectives and specialized knowledge from climate migrants combine with Canadian research capabilities and institutional frameworks. The intersection of global knowledge systems creates innovation potential that isolated national systems cannot achieve independently. The geopolitical transformation follows inevitably from Canadian success, with converting climate crisis into strategic advantage. Countries facing climate displacement challenges recognize Canadian leadership in population integration while seeking partnerships that provide access to Canadian expertise and resources. Climate-vulnerable nations begin orienting their policies toward maintaining positive relationships with Canada to ensure continued access to Canadian integration programs for their displaced populations. Countries experiencing climate displacement pressure seek Canadian assistance with developing their own management capabilities. Traditional alliance structures become less relevant than climate migration partnerships, as countries prioritize relationships that help them manage the demographic challenges that climate change creates. Canada emerges as the indispensable partner for any nation seeking successful responses to climate-induced population displacement. The financial implications reflect the magnitude of economic advantage that successful climate migration integration provides. According to early indicators from economic assessments, climate migrants integrated through Canadian systems contribute approximately 150% more to economic growth than traditional immigration programs due to their motivation levels, diverse skill sets, and systematic integration support. Canadian GDP growth acceleration from climate migration integration is projected to exceed 2% annually by 2030, as integrated populations establish businesses, increase consumer demand, and contribute to productivity improvements across multiple economic sectors. The economic benefits compound as successful integration creates employment opportunities for Canadian citizens while expanding domestic markets for Canadian businesses. Canadian tax revenue increases substantially as climate migrants transition rapidly from service recipients to tax-paying contributors while requiring lower per capita government expenditures than traditional demographic growth patterns. The fiscal advantages of climate migration integration exceed the costs of integration programs within 30 months of population arrival. International investment flows toward Canadian markets accelerate as global capital recognizes the economic advantages that demographic growth and cultural diversification provide. Canadian cities attract business development as companies seek access to diverse consumer markets and specialized labor pools that climate migration creates. The cascading effects of Canadian climate migration success create competitive advantages that extend far beyond population policy to encompass every aspect of national competitiveness. Canadian universities attract international students and faculty seeking exposure to diverse global perspectives and innovative research environments that climate migration enables. Canadian cultural industries benefit from global knowledge and artistic traditions that climate migrants contribute, while Canadian entertainment and media companies gain access to diverse markets through established connections that integrated populations maintain with their regions of origin. Canadian international business development accelerates as climate migrants provide market knowledge, language capabilities, and business networks that facilitate Canadian economic expansion into regions that other developed nations struggle to access effectively. The strategic patience that Canadian climate migration planning demonstrates reflects sophisticated understanding of how demographic transitions create permanent competitive advantages over periods measured in decades rather than years. While competitors focus on short-term political management of migration pressure, Canada has positioned itself to benefit from the inevitable population movements that climate change will create. The integration infrastructure that Canada has developed represents irreversible competitive advantage because other nations cannot replicate Canadian geographic space, resource availability, or institutional experience within the timeframes that climate displacement will require. Countries that wait until climate migration accelerates will find themselves competing for management capabilities that Canada has already monopolized. The demonstration that systematic preparation for climate migration can transform humanitarian crisis into strategic advantage provides a model that other nations will attempt to replicate. However, the geographic and institutional requirements for successful climate migration integration at Canadian scale exist nowhere else among developed nations. Australian attempts to expand climate migration integration face geographic constraints and political opposition that prevent systematic implementation. Canadian success demonstrates the benefits of climate migration integration while highlighting the barriers that prevent other nations from achieving comparable results. European experiments with climate migration management have failed to achieve integration success at scale due to political fragmentation and cultural tensions that systematic Canadian approaches have avoided through strategic population distribution and accelerated integration programming. American political systems have proven incapable of managing existing migration challenges, making expansion to climate migration integration politically impossible despite economic benefits that Canadian experience demonstrates. The most remarkable aspect of Canadian climate migration strategy is how completely it has escaped international attention. While global media focuses on border security and exclusion policies, Canada has quietly built the infrastructure for converting the 21st century's greatest humanitarian challenge into its ultimate competitive advantage. The countries that view climate migration as a threat to be minimized have missed the opportunity to benefit from the largest transfer of human capital in history. The nation that recognized climate displacement as a strategic resource has positioned itself to inherit the skills, knowledge, and economic dynamism of entire regions, while competitors struggle with demographic decline and economic stagnation. According to early indicators from strategic assessments, the advantages that Canada gains from successful climate migration integration will become permanent and decisive within the current decade. The human capital that climate displacement makes available represents irreplaceable resources that will determine economic competitiveness for generations. Countries that exclude climate migrants lose access to the innovation, entrepreneurship, and productivity that these populations provide. Countries that fail at integration attempts waste resources while creating social tensions that undermine political stability. Only countries that develop systematic integration capabilities benefit from climate migration while avoiding the negative consequences that unsuccessful approaches create. Canada has demonstrated that patient strategic preparation combined with systematic implementation can convert global crisis into national advantage. The climate migration integration system represents more than refugee policy. It represents a comprehensive strategy for dominating the post-climate economy through demographic advantages that competitors cannot replicate or counter. The 18 months that positioned Canada to benefit from civilization's greatest challenge have already begun reshaping international relationships, economic development patterns, and competitive advantages in ways that most observers have not yet recognized. The transformation requires no dramatic announcements or institutional collapses, only the mathematical inevitability of superior preparation producing superior outcomes. By the time other nations recognize the magnitude of Canadian advantage in climate migration integration, the most valuable displaced populations will already be contributing to Canadian economic development, while competitors struggle with the social and economic costs of failed integration attempts or missed opportunities. The crisis that will destroy social systems in every other developed nation has become the foundation for Canadian dominance in the post-climate world. The quiet preparation for inevitable displacement has created capabilities that make traditional measures of national power optional rather than necessary. Most countries still think this is about humanitarian obligations and border security. The mathematics of demographic advantage suggest they are measuring the wrong transformation entirely. history will record the climate migration integration system as the strategic decision that secured Canadian leadership for the next century, while its competitors prepared for the wrong crisis entirely.